From Courtside the Virtual Hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, episode number 405. Andrew with you once again. I am Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. My co-host is Derek. You know him in the forum as D43, and he is D4384 on Twitter.
No, I'm happy to be here again. Did you see that graphic that, and this isn't basketball gaming related, but I wanted to bring this up to kick off the show because I was just blown away by it. Did you see the graphic that I shared that showed that the Lakers during the 21-22 season walk for 68% of their basketball games?
No, I was amazed, and how could the plumbers and dentists keep up with that pace?
No, it just blows my. I mean, it matches what I watch. I watched the Celtics play the Raptors a couple of weeks ago as well, and I said the same thing to my brother. It's like they're not getting getting the rebound and outletting. They're kind of just like walking it up and down the floor. There's not a lot of action off the ball. There's just a lot of standing around and everything. But 68% of the time they're walking. So 68% per game. What do you think the Showtime Lakers of the 80s were for walking percentage? Go back and watch those games. How often do you believe that the 80s Lakers, the Showtime Lakers, how much you think they were walking? I would say maybe, I don't know, 10, 20% of the game, if that. I mean, they were always on the move. It just tells me again why I get so frustrated, watching the NBA today, because it's for me, it's straight up boring most of the time.
So is there actually any numbers for the 80s Lakers? Because I would have guessed 10 to 20% as well. I don't think not a lot of the half-court set and walking it up back in the day. But is there any numbers on that?
There is no numbers on that I can find. But even the Celtics, which was at times a little bit more of a slow-down offense, because they like to pound the ball into Parrish and McHale and even Bird as well, whether it be in the high post or Bird as, a playmaker in the half court, etc. But even they just had so much movement off the ball. You know what I mean? In the half court set, there wasn't this constant standing around on the perimeter and, playing a 4 or 5 out offense where there's a ball handler who's doing most of the movement and he's mostly dribbling in place. And then he makes one move to the hoop and then kicks it out to a shooter, etc. There wasn't as much of that back then. So I would even say some of the teams that slowed it down a little bit more in the 80s, in the 90s and whatnot, they still had more movement than the majority of the teams today, and walked less because players were moving so much more often off the ball, and they were also a lot more active on defense as a result, because we're not talking about walking just on offense either. We're talking about walking overall, right? So lack of movement on offense and defense. So, but I saw that and I was just kind of disgusted by it, because that barely, in my opinion, if you're walking 68% of the game, what does that remind you of? It makes me think of the last game of the night during a pickup night.
Yeah,
right.
When you're exhausted.
There's the majority of the people are kind of just moving a little bit slower than they were. They're playing a little bit disinterested and whatnot. They're basically, some people are not getting back on defense because it's the last game of the night and they're just kind of mailing it in. If you're walking 68% of the game, if your team is walking 68% of the game, that barely resembles basketball, if it is basketball at all. That's the way I look at it.
It's certainly, when they talk about how slow everything used to be, mostly because it's not shown in 60 frames per second, usually, unless it's somebody is restoring the footage, as you often do, and have even done going back to the 60s and 70s and whatnot. But it really does explain the online scene in 2K, because you see that 5 out, you see that lack of ball movement, that one-on-one ISO play, the selfishness, the going for stats, the passing up open shots under the rim to get an extra assist or go for a three-pointer that's contested. Obviously, the kids are watching basketball, and that's what they think basketball is. And you don't see some of the intelligent play, but it is on an extra level in the rec. I mean, I think I've told the story before. Kenny and I were playing, we were in the rec, and we were up by 8 with about a minute left. So that's a pretty comfortable lead for a minute left if you play the clock, if you work the clock properly. And the kids we were playing with, and I'm going to say they were kids, or certainly people who weren't knowledgeable about the sport, they were pushing the ball, and just running up and trying to pad their stats, get some extra baskets instead of running the clock down. And of course, they missed the shots, made a couple of bad turnovers there in that last minute, and we blew an 8-point lead that we easily could have held on to because they were just playing out of control, not working the clock. There is a time to hold on to the ball and waste the clock when you've got that lead in the final minute. But there's just no IQ there. And it's not that bad in real life. There is a bit more IQ, smart play in real life compared to virtual basketball. But you can see how that effect of the modern game is really affecting the online scene, which is why I'm glad I have nothing to do with it anymore.
Well, you know what they are talking. You mentioned a point about they're kind of emulating the NBA, and that's why they're running their offenses that way, and that's why they're just standing around on the 3-point line and whatnot. But have you ever watched AAU footage?
I've not seen.
No,
I haven't seen much of it. No, it's not really shown here in Australia, so I'm gonna have to go out of my way to see it.
Yeah, they're doing that stuff in AAU.
Right.
Go ahead and go, YouTube it. They're walking back on defense. They're not working hard on defense. They're walking. There's a lot of the dribbling and place ISO stuff while players are just like standing around and whatnot. And they're not just doing it. They're not just doing it on 2K because they see it from the NBA, even though they do see it from the NBA. But they're also experiencing this in their real life basketball exploits, right? It's translating to the real life court, whether they play in AAU, whether they play for their schools, whether they're playing, pickup and whatnot. So it's just like the perfect storm. But, you talked about me remastering some of that footage. I would guarantee you, I would put my savings on the line about this, that the 60s Celtics moved far more and walked far less than this Lakers team in 21-22.
Well, you look at the pace. Look at the amount of field goals attempted per game. Absolutely.
I mean, they were on the, Bill Russell was on the board, Satch Sanders when he was there and whatnot. They're on the boards. It's a outlet and people are moving. There's constant moving off the ball too. Constant moving off the ball, constant screens, constant handoffs, all of that stuff. I would guarantee that they're walking less. So yeah, it's just crazy. I wanted to lead off the show, but it made me also think about your NBA 2K22, my NBA, because you said you were trying to get into that, and I was thinking, Andrew isn't as big of a fan of the now NBA, just like I'm not. Like, we're just not. It's not what we grew up with. It's not the same sport. It feels like even that we fell in love with. The game's lacking personality. It's those types of offenses that we were just talking about, and that type of laziness. I was wondering how your NBA 2K22 Bulls My NBA was going, and I figured I'd ask you on the show. So how is that going? Are you still interested in the game? Does the game still kind of grab you like it did when you were first playing it? And I was interested in how that's going.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of not going at the moment, unfortunately. And it's not because I'm not interested in playing traditional 5v5 or franchise modes, because I'm very much into that idea now. But 2K22, I just haven't really been feeling it. I've been playing older games, 2K17, which we're going to be talking about this week, reflecting on that game, which is a favourite of both of ours. And I'm actually more inclined to go back and continue that My GM in 2K14 than I am play 2K22 My NBA, which is a shame because I love a lot of the features of My NBA and the depth and everything else, and then there are issues with 2K14, obviously. But gameplay-wise, I'm just not feeling 2K22. There's a sluggishness to the players that earlier games don't have, and yeah, I'm just not feeling it. And some of the shooting mechanics, I've tried. I've given it a shot. I've had some fun here and there, but I find when I turn the difficulty up, it just becomes ridiculous against the CPU, at least playing solo, because you don't have that extra brain as you do playing with your brothers.
Remember I told you that would happen if you go back and listen a couple shows ago? I said once you put that difficulty up, it's not that you can't win, it's just that the gameplay ends up being the most ridiculously frustrating cheese fest.
Exactly.
That you've ever played almost in video game history. I'm not even kidding when I say that. It's all of the issues are amplified, and then you find yourself just trying to dodge issues all game. And like I said, I'm going to say again, this isn't about winning and losing because we're winning. Right? My brother has sat there and watched me play full games against the computer on Hall of Fame and win. but the entire time it's just dodging a minefield of issues and being frustrated with the gameplay.
Exactly.
And being completely honest, the gameplay is dry.
It is. And that's a shame. It's a shame because I was very much looking forward to getting into my NBA this year. Look, I'm going to be playing some franchise mode moving forward, and I'm going to be playing 5v5 moving forward. I've had enough of my career. Lots of fond memories with my career and its connected modes, as I've said before, including 2K17, 500 games of 2K Pro-Am with the NLSC Thrill-Ho, as I've mentioned many times before. We recounted many sessions on the shows many years ago. But yeah, that's what I want to play, the 5v5, a franchise mode or a season mode. Obviously, we've been talking about Live 06, doing that over Parsec. But yeah, 2K22 is just not gripping me at the moment. Even playing with the classic teams, as I've been doing and sending you some footage of some of those games, it's okay. And if you play on the easy difficult level, you can certainly get some highlights, but then you're not getting challenged enough. So it's a balancing act. I haven't tried messing with the sliders at all, but like you say, there's still issues that you're dodging that the sliders don't address with the game. So, yeah, a couple of months in, I'm kind of... I don't want to say I'm done with 2K22, but I'm definitely not feeling it. There is that dryness, as you said. But fortunately, we do have all those other games to play. And if people are enjoying it, that's fine. I just can't really get into it, which is a shame. But at the very least, I've got my taste for franchise mode back.
Yeah, I think it's just... Some of it is just lacking excitement too. Like I said, dry. The dunks have been far better in past games. You know what I mean? Like harder dunks, more explosive feeling dunks. The sound effects on the dunks. Just more dynamic moves around the hoop and more control in past games as well.
So it's funny that you mention more control because, in a way, adding more control in 2K22, I think, has ruined the game. I'm, of course, talking about the issue that we've mentioned a few times in recent weeks, which is the alley-oop meter. And I feel that giving more control to that aspect and that mechanic has actually ruined that mechanic. I am making some alley-oops in 2K22 now with it, and there was a great bounce alley-oop in the top 10 this week. But I'm still not a fan of that mechanic. And sometimes expanding the mechanic unnecessarily. And the 3 buttons in NBA Live 07, 3 shoot buttons in Live 07, that is another great example of this, is that sometimes more control, if not implemented properly and implemented in ways that you don't need more control over because it just makes it more contrived, does ruin the game.
It's not even more control, though, because you can't control the mechanic properly. It's uncontrollable.
True.
Most of the time. Right, so it's not even really more control, and I don't think that's what ruins the game. I think it's a huge headache, and I think that it was poorly implemented, and I think that it is a frustration. But like I've said, what really ruins the game at times and really causes the most frustrations is that gravity issue of being sucked into different players all over the court. Whether you're under the hoop or on the perimeter. And then obviously the skating and the absolutely piss poor post game and face up game in comparison to so many past titles. So that is an added frustration, but it's all of those other issues that I just mentioned that kind of just create the perfect storm and create an atmosphere that's not incredibly fun. You know what I mean? And what's the goal? To have fun.
Exactly.
And if the goal is to be competitive, the game has to support that goal and support a competitive game. And I don't think that NBA 2K22 does a good job of that.
It doesn't, and which is why I'm not saying I'm done with it, but at the moment I'm actually looking elsewhere. It just hasn't really captured me this year, and others are enjoying it, which is great, and I want them to. But as I look to do our 2K23 wish list, which I need to get on posting in the forum, there's a lot of suggestions we can make because it's funny because everybody was saying it's the perfect game and it's amazing and everyone's hating, which is what everybody says at launch, except for some of the really rough releases where it's very obvious from the right out of the gate that there are problems. But this is why you have to temper those initial impressions. You can certainly say that you're having fun and that it's really making that great first impression on you, if that is the case. It wasn't really the case with us with 2K22, but it's very premature that in the first week, people saying that this is the best game ever and anybody saying otherwise is a hater. That's why you don't say it. You've got to play it a little bit and wait for some patches as well.
So many fanboys, Andrew.
Yeah.
So many fanboys who just speak out without thinking first, and or they have agendas and whatnot, and it gets old every year, if we're being completely honest. So yeah, I mean, we finished our My NBA, my brother and I. We finished all 82 games. But the difference is between my NBA and your My NBA is, my brother and I are playing on the same team. We have stat goals, and that's what drives the season, right? So, and we're playing sort of a fantasy type season where it's, us using legends, so some of the greatest retired players of all time against regular NBA teams. So there's a huge difference between that season that we're playing and the one that you dove into with the regular Bulls and whatnot. And, you're not playing your My NBA with the Bulls with stat goals really in mind. And that's what drives our full season, right? So, we've said that we've gotten our money's worth because we did, because that's what my brother and I do every single year when we can on basketball video games, is we do one of those seasons. And NBA 2K22 served that purpose for us. Not that we didn't have frustrations, but it did its job in that regard. But if you're looking to be competitive, or you're looking to just do regular team versus regular team, and you're upping the difficulty level against the CPU, even if you're winning, etc., the game just becomes frustrating because you're just trying to dodge the minefield of gameplay issues. And like I said, the game just isn't super exciting at all either. So yeah, it's just sometimes it's the perfect storm, and I feel bad because I know that you were excited to try to dive back into My NBA, and it just didn't work out the way you wanted it to.
Well, look, the save is there. I'm not saying I won't give it another try at some point. I do want to try something out on the PS5 version of 2K22, which is the next-gen version that I own, the next-gen console that I have. MJ Wizards has finally released his fixed classic teams roster for the PS5. It has all the adjusted ratings. It has some amazing created faces. So I do want to check that out. I mean, obviously it's not going to overcome all of those gameplay issues, those core issues that you mentioned. But if nothing else, I'm interested to see how it plays with some fixed ratings, because that, as we've said many times before, and you've made Twitter threads on this, only covering 1% of the issues, as you've said. But I'm keen to check out that roster because he's put some great work into that. I do need to put a bulletin out there. I did retweet his release tweet. He's done some great work with that roster, so I'll check that out and maybe make a video of it.
Some of those faces are just awesome. Like that J.R. Smith looks exactly like J.R. Smith.
It's impressive.
That created J.R. Smith with those tattoos and whatnot. I was going through that thread and looking at some of them, and I'm like, these guys look like they could be basically in the game. So that is incredibly impressive what they were able to do with those created players and whatnot. It is kind of a shame that they limit you in offline roster creation when you're playing the console version. As in, it would be cool if MJ Wizards, who loves the history of the game and who's been, creating this amazing roster, if he was able to say, hey, you know what? I want to put the 05-06 Lakers in. Let me add a new team, right? And, label them the 05-06 Lakers and put that team together and put that in a roster and let everybody download that. So I think that I said this on, I think it was episode 402. I said, I think that could be the future of basketball gaming, or sports gaming in general, is, those My League tools and My NBA tools where you can create your own stadium and you can create your own jerseys and you can rename your team and all of that stuff. That gets brought into offline roster creation, and you're able to do that stuff that I just mentioned and share your rosters. And maybe there's other games have done this. Maybe there's a way that you can upload a, face file even of like a picture of a real NBA player of the past and whatnot, and put that onto the in-game player model. So that could be the future of sports gaming. But, MJ Wizards did a good job, from what I can tell, and doing the best that he can to try to fix those default classic teams.
Very impressive. Definitely worth checking out if you're on PlayStation 5. Those creative player tools, you mentioned there are obviously limitations, which there are. One area where they really have improved is that ability to make faces that look like cyber faces. Because back in the day, and this goes for pretty much any game where you could create a player, create a wrestler in wrestling games, your created player, wrestler, whatever, would look very different. They looked created. They looked like a custom player. They didn't mesh with the rest of the wrestlers or players that had proper faces. Now, with a little bit of care, and you've dabbled with this as well, making faces with the in-game tools is much more viable. So he's done a tremendous job there. But I absolutely agree as far as getting those tools, those functions into the offline roster editing, renaming teams, creating teams as we used to be able to do, adding things like being able to completely customize the bio data for players, even entering career stats would be awesome. I mean, this is a lot of stuff that is not necessarily going to be very popular, and it's also not going to make money. And that is the big problem with bringing back some old features. And we're going to be talking about old features in the mailbag this week. But one of the big problems, and I'm sure we'll circle back to this, is that if it doesn't make money, if it doesn't generate revenue, then it's not something that 2K is going to really focus on. And that's not necessarily the developers who don't want to do that. I'm sure they'd love to give us those features and find a way to do it, but they've got to prioritize what the suits want. And that is a big problem with game design these days, is that if it doesn't fit those recurrent revenue mechanics, it's less likely that they're going to go out of their way to add them.
I think it would be popular to be able to bring those, my NBA customization into out of my NBA and put it into regular roster editing and being able to share those rosters. I do think that would be incredibly popular. I don't think it would be the ultimate game changer. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, it wouldn't be something that would be a game changer for NBA 2K overall, because what they're still advertising and what they still are pushing people towards, as we've talked about so many times before, is my career, right? And my team, because that's their moneymaker. So, adding that functionality that is not, going to be locked behind virtual currency and whatnot, and locked behind gambling mechanics and everything, is that something that they would really push for? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think it would be, the ability, even if it was there, it wouldn't be advertised heavily by 2K because it's not their moneymaker.
Exactly, and you've also got licensing concerns as well. Are the NBA going to really, because they have a very strict control over what content and how it's presented in the games, are they going to be happy with the idea that you can put unlicensed teams and players in the game more easily than you can at the moment? Obviously, these workarounds, you can do it to a certain extent, and we get away with a lot with the modding community, with what we can do with external tools on PC. But the NBA is probably not going to want a situation where, you can easily turn this into an NCAA game, or you can add these players that aren't licensed, or whatever. So there's also that.
Teddy Bear the Gamer, sorry for interrupting you. Teddy Bear the Gamer has been showing highlights, and he was talking to me about it. He was, showing highlights of this college roster that he's been playing. College, I'm guessing it's a college my NBA.
Yep.
My God, that looks good. That looks good. Like the courts, the jerseys, and all of that stuff. It looks like a real college basketball game. And he was showing highlights on Twitter for that and stuff. So that they're still like 2K sees this stuff. Like, we've talked about this before. They see what the modding community is doing. They're seeing what people are customizing in my NBA and all of that stuff. But I agree with you. Making it harder for people to do it and limiting their ability to do some of this stuff is probably one of the goals of the company, right? Because you don't want to run into those license issues and those complaints and whatnot. So, yeah. But, I wanted to point out that, these college rosters are happening and people are playing them. And, people are going into my NBA and they're creating teams and jerseys and courts, recreating the Seattle Supersonics and whatnot. So it's nice that people are still able to do that, but I just think it could be expanded in the future.
Oh, definitely. And the mechanics are obviously there in the game, as you say, with the rebranding of My League, My NBA, etc. So it's not like the functions aren't already in the game, but it's whether we get them outside the game, that expansion. I mean, it's funny that even in 2021, we still can't create a player and give them draft information.
Yeah. Like I said, there's so much untapped potential in video games. In 2021, I thought by now we'd be able to customize the scoreboard, right? Like, be able to make our own scoreboard, like something little like that. Maybe add a watermark to the game, or like be able to select different filters. Like, say we're playing in using a 70s classic team, maybe they say select 70s filter or something like that. Like, we can do that. Like, technology supports that, right now. In fact, even going back to, we'll talk about this later, even going back to NBA 2K12, when you're playing the NBA greatest mode and you're playing like a challenge that includes Bill Russell, what happens? You have the black and white filter, right? So there's more, there's a lot more that we can do with basketball video games that hasn't been done. And that is part of the excitement of the future of basketball gaming.
It does come down to the suits and that focus on recurrent revenue. And you and I have both spoken before. We did a whole show about it, in fact, when we did the post-mortem of 2K18. We felt that was a real turning point because that was the year that brought in the neighborhood, and you've got that bigger emphasis on clothing items, which has just exploded in recent years as well, to the point where the 2K Twitter is saying, what's your fit? Share what your My Player is wearing. And not just as a fun thing to do as they would do back in the day, but now it's a case of, do you have the latest designer clothes that cost 25,000 VC, which some people clearly are doing and spending their money to get there because it's become such a status symbol in the game, which is a problem we've touched on many times before, and I've written about it. It goes beyond basketball gaming. It's a problem with Fortnite and other such games as well that have those cosmetic items that where players are getting bullied. Kids are getting bullied into having to spend money or grind to get these clothing items, which have nothing to do with, especially in basketball, really have nothing to do with basketball and NBA 2K. So it really has changed there. So 2K17 in many ways, it was that last game where it felt like there was that focus on the NBA. Obviously, it did have Pro-Am and Playground and everything else, or was it still The Park at the time? Or My Park? It's gone through a couple of names over the years. But it was that last game that really had that NBA focus, or so it feels. And it also had there was the last game with that old motion system, which when I went back and played it recently, I really enjoyed.
There's a reason why it's one of our favorite basketball video games of all time. The way the game feels when you're making moves, the dribbling, even just the simple things like sliding on defense. It just feels so much better based on the much better foot planning technology and whatnot. Less canned drives to the hoop, less canned happenings all over the floor, not being sucked into your defender constantly, or you being sucked into the offensive player. The much superior, far superior face-up game, and the superior post game, the control that you have, all of that, the right stick control, finishing on the right and left side of the rim, and signature, dunks, in traffic and whatnot by pulling back on the joystick, the joystick towards the baseline to do reverse layups, all of this stuff. Just NBA 2K17, while it does have some of its faults, is just overall really enjoyable to play on the sticks, and it just feels more like real basketball. You don't feel like you're trying to dodge a minefield of issues when you're playing NBA 2K17. I think you could agree. And 2K18 was the start of those player movement issues that have just bothered me so much over the last few years.
It really was. And the biggest issues for me, as I've mentioned before, are the sometimes cheap charging fouls. They are definitely more of an issue in multiplayer because you can abuse it, obviously, and people would, and they're trying to draw and would draw charging fouls in the backcourt in Pro-Am. And it's one of those things that they never really fixed it. They couldn't police it. It does happen less in solo play or multiplayer against a CPU. Anytime you're playing against a CPU, you still get a few where you're not even using sprint, and yet it still happens on a very soft collision. But it's not game breaking. Losing the ball sometimes is a much bigger issue. Although you can also work it to your advantage. But I sent you some clips of a game I played with the college DLC. And the all-time college teams DLC, and I was playing it on PS5. I did find that you could still have that unlocked on your account if you have already bought that on PS4 back in the day. So that was some good news there. But I played Michigan State versus Oklahoma, and just everything from the player movement to the steal mechanics. When I poked it loose and it knocked up in the air, and Denzel Valentine scooped it up and ran the full court for a dunk. That just felt so satisfying. And you don't get that satisfaction in some of the recent games, including 2K22, with that heaviness and that feeling of running in mud and not having that lateral movement. And also the press steal to foul mechanics, which are still there. I think 2K17 was the last time I really enjoyed steal mechanics in 2K.
Amazing steal mechanics and block mechanics in NBA 2K17. I think some of the most realistic in 2K series history. The two biggest frustrations that I have with NBA 2K17 are the brick wall defense and the defender just moving out of the way sometimes on the when you're bringing up the ball, like the shooting guard or small forward. Computer handled player just kind of like moves out of the way and you can just like run to the hoop. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough where I consider it a problem. And I can't believe that wasn't fixed during the game's cycle and whatnot. But I want to go back to the brick wall defense. It's a shame that they couldn't find the right balance like they did with NBA 2K16. I think that NBA 2K16, outside of leaving a trailer 3 wide open a little bit too much, NBA 2K16 might be the most realistic defense that they were ever able to produce in a video game, and the perfect balance between blow-by and brick wall. It just feels organic and natural, and my brother and I talk about it all the time. Sometimes NBA 2K17 is more fun than NBA 2K16, but NBA 2K16 might be the best sim game that they ever played, that they ever made. But yeah, you shared those highlights with me, and you showed me alley-oops from Magic Johnson and whatnot because you were using Michigan State, all-time the college Michigan State team, and the highlights look amazing. Like, the game looks really good. The foot planning is fantastic. The players are moving on defense far more realistic than I've seen in NBA 2K22, as far as they're not just like sliding everywhere and they're not constantly out of position and whatnot. I was glad that you shared those with me because it made me want to throw on the game, right? Like, I mean, I might go in tonight after we record this podcast and say to my brother, hey, let's play a game of NBA 2K17 because it looks good. It looks fun.
Exactly. And I was playing the PS4 version because I wanted to play with the college teams. I haven't played too many games with them. I bought them kind of just to grab the DLC while it was available. I've learned my lesson from things like the NBA 2K12 Legends Showcase DLC, where I just didn't get it when it was available, and then because I thought, oh, I'll never need this, but then suddenly a couple of years later you start doing Way Back Wednesday features, and it's hard to do hands-on impressions of these old DLCs and whatnot when you don't have them on hand. Obviously, you can talk about them to some extent, but you can't give the first-hand impressions or go back and revisit it yourself. So it's one of those things where you really have to grab it before it's gone, which is what I did. But I wanted to play a game with it. I did. It was a lot of fun. I'll admit, since we started the top 10, since you started doing the top 10 again, I probably got a lot of turnovers with Magic simply because I'm trying to make some flashy plays and trying to get a top 10. I'm trying to force a top 10 play. So that did interrupt the flow of the game a little bit, my strategy a little bit. But I did have a couple of nice plays, I felt. A lot of fun to use Magic, obviously. Whenever there's a flashy pass button in Magic Johnson, you do end up abusing it to some extent. But it was a lot of fun. The alley-oops felt satisfying, especially without a meter. The passes, making some long bounce passes from Magic as well. I didn't capture that one. But some of the fast breaks, and everything about it was just fun. And we've said it so many times before on the show, but it really bears repeating over and over again, quite frankly, is that gaming shouldn't be a grind or a chore. You shouldn't have to work to have fun. And going back and revisiting some of these games this year, which is something I've been able to do since I'm no longer grinding up a player for my career and the connected modes, or really focusing on getting all the cards in my team. Now that I don't have to do that, I don't have to worry about dumping hours into the latest title just to have a viable my player or my team squad. So I'm really enjoying going back to these games, especially since I played 2,800 hours of 2K17 on PS4, but mostly my career.
And you're still still having fun with the game
because it's different.
Even with all of
those
games,
now.
And it's but you were still having fun all the way up till the end of the cycle with 2K17. We talked about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you've used the word fun so many times already. Just talking about NBA 2K17, and we're looking at almost 6 years after it came out. We're at 5 years, after it originally came out. I want to say something really quick about the fast breaks. You mentioned having fun with Magic Johnson on the fast break. The fast breaks are 10 times more fun and more realistic than NBA 2K22 because on NBA 2K22 they're forcing your player to slow down. he has that hitch. Not only does your player feel heavy, not only is he skating on NBA 2K22, but oftentimes the game just makes you slow down. It has that, like, this built-in slowdown animation that I swear they just implemented because to try to fix some, the offense being way too overpowering. But you don't have that in NBA 2K17, right? You don't have those frustrations. And if I want to throw an alley-oop on NBA 2K17 and my teammate is in a good position to receive it and dunk it, you damn well know that I'm going to be able to throw that alley-oop and have a good chance of completing that play because the mechanic makes sense, right? If I want to dunk on a smaller player, a weaker player in traffic, I can do that without worrying about a uncontrollable faulty meter, right? So, like, there's so much less frustration when you pick up NBA 2K17. And like I said, how many times have you used the word fun to talk about NBA 2K17 when you picked it up again? So it should be about fun. And if you are being competitive, the competition aspect of it it shouldn't be mired with just constant frustration and dodging of issues. It should be real competition.
And this is where we get into our old issue and our favorite saying of get good. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can get used to poor mechanics and you can make them work. Look, it's become a running gag and I haven't mentioned it for a while, but it became a running gag for a while where I bring up Bart versus the Space Mutants on the original Nintendo. And it's my go-to example of a game that I have nostalgia for, that I enjoy, that I can play, but man, does it have some terrible mechanics, especially when you've got games like Super Mario Bros. 3 right there showing you how to do a great platforming game in the 8-bit era, and yet you've just messed up the controls so much. You can get used to them, you can make them work, you can have fun with them. It's a very difficult game to finish because it's quote-unquote Nintendo hard, to use the TV tropes parlance, but it's not a well-designed game. With level design, controls, whatever, the other Simpsons games from that time are around the same because they all use the same mechanics pretty much. You can get used to them. You can even get good with them. I can usually breeze through the first couple of levels of that game, but it doesn't make it a well-designed game. And we've seen that with basketball games over the years too. You can get used to them. You can get good with them. And 2K21 with its shot aiming, you could get used to it. But was it well implemented? Was it well designed? I disagree that it was.
So Bart versus the Space Mutants is a platformer. And like Super Mario 3, but Super Mario 3 the mechanics make a lot more sense. And that's the way I look at too with NBA 2K17 and NBA 2K18. NBA 2K18 with the new motion system, that is not the way you make a basketball video game, right?
Right.
NBA 2K17, that's how you make a basketball video game. It's like the comparison between Bart versus the Space Mutants and Super Mario Bros. 3.
And last week we talked about NBA Live 08 taking away shot timing. Now, it's one of those situations where you can say, oh, well, you just don't understand the concept. The concept is we've got the new hotspots, and the idea is to get into the places where the players can shoot the best, and then just shoot an open shot for the best possible chance of going in. We understand that. It's very condescending to say, oh, you just don't understand the concept. You can understand the concept. You can even master it. But that critical mind that you have to have when you, especially if you're a content creator that is evaluating these games and trying to speak on behalf of the community, looking at whether this idea that, yes, you can get used to, yes, you can understand, is it optimal? And that's something that people forget, because if people like the system, and again, the reason that I almost defend Bart versus the Space Mutants at times is because I can get used to it, but then I have to remind myself, no, it is very flawed. You just have a lot of nostalgia for it, and you can get used to it. It is more objectively a poorly designed game. And so it goes with basketball games as well. Again, the NBA Live 08 shot timing, the removal of shot timing in Live 08, and just focusing on the hotspots, relying on the hotspots, is a great example of that. It makes sense when you look at the logic, but its execution doesn't work well, and it's not satisfying because it's taking control out of people's hands.
Oh, speaking of which, NBA 2K17, we're talking about mechanics. The shooting in that game just feels right.
Yes.
I feel like those are really strong shooting mechanics in NBA 2K17, whether you have the meter on or off. The shots, the way they're timed, the animations that play out and whatnot, I find them almost the best in the series. And that's a big part of basketball, because how many shots are you putting up a game?
It's really only the guarded shots, the closely guarded shots that really mess you up.
Yeah, the protected shots is a bad idea. Yeah, protected shots is a bad idea. I've never liked those. You can lessen the amount that happens by turning down the jump shot defense strength on release and gather, and then also, lowering the body up sensitivity. We have the body up sensitivity at 0, actually, in the sliders. You can lower the amount it happens, but no, it definitely is a frustration. And when you shoot a protected shot, the chances of it going in are like almost 0 in that game, which is incredibly unrealistic, because if you're a taller player and you have a smaller player on you, you should just be able to shoot over him.
Exactly. Yeah.
But in that game, they force you into a fadeaway. So that is another frustration with 2K17. I wanted to bring something up though before we move on real quick. You know what I noticed the more that I played against people on Parsec?
What's that?
I noticed that the games that I was pretty critical of, because I didn't enjoy the mechanics as much when I was playing against the computer, that I enjoy them 10 times more playing against somebody head to head. I put on NBA Live 08, and you and I played that, the PS3 version of NBA Live 08. And you and I played that, and you were a little frustrated on your end with the way it was working in that matchup. But I enjoyed that game a lot more playing against you than when I was playing against the computer. I enjoyed the mechanics more. I enjoyed running things more, facing up and then going to the hoop, attacking the basket. I enjoyed it a lot more. And, same thing that when I revisited NCAA NCAA Basketball 09, and I connected with different people. I connected with about 4 or 5 different people on that game. And I'm playing that game and I'm like, wow, this game is a lot of fun head to head, but I wasn't really a fan of this game when I was playing it solo. It is wild how different it is, like the way you play a game, how you view it. You know what I mean? Like, you talked about this with me as far as like playing NBA Jam OFE. Sure, NBA Jam OFE on Fire Edition is fun for you against the computer, right? But it's not as fun when you're playing co-op. Like, there's nothing like sharing that experience with somebody. So I've really appreciated connecting with different people, because it's making me appreciate some of these older titles that I didn't enjoy as much because I wasn't able to play either with or against another human on those games.
No, unquestionably. And I think a big part of that is you get by AI issues, and there's more balance when you're playing competitively against another user. And when you're playing co-op with another user, you're not having to rely on CPU teammates as much. You've got that extra brain to work with. You can strategize in ways that you can't when it's just one on 5, basically, with 4 drones that you're hoping will move properly and get into position and whatnot. So you get around issues if there are problems with the teammate AI, if there are cheesy moments with the opponent AI, where they can just pretty much ignore what you're doing defensively because the CPU has decided I'm going to be challenging, so I'm going to score, or the comeback logic. And of course, there is momentum, inbuilt momentum with user versus user as well in many games over the years. But you have more balance competitively going against another user, and playing with the user, you've got that advantage of that second brain. So sometimes those issues that really bother you when you're just trying to make the best of it, you against the CPU, it does alleviate those issues. And a lot of those games, the arcade games in particular, are a lot more fun playing competitively or co-op with a friend. And Parsec has, as we've said many times before, has really opened up so many opportunities with this. In fact, we're looking at doing another tournament after the Live 10 tournament wraps up. You put out a tweet with a poll, and it looks like people want to go for an arcade game next, which we're in favor of as well.
Yeah, I will say before we move on to the poll, the shared experience aspect of it is just of monumental importance. When you're playing a head-to-head with somebody, against somebody, part of you wants to show off, right?
Sure.
And part of you wants to, make a great move, and for the other person to say, oh, wow, that was amazing. And then part of you wants to celebrate moves that they're able to do and whatnot. And you guys have that shared experience. There's just nothing that beats it. It's just awesome. And, I connected recently with at B-Ball Video Games on NBA 2K10, and we played a couple games using the amazing 96-97 roster. And I just enjoy that game so much more playing against another human than I do playing against the computer. And we've had a blast, and he's just really enjoying that roster. Like he said, he's like, I can't even believe we can do this. Like, I can't believe that we're able to play this roster together on a game that came out over a decade ago.
And he's on a Mac, isn't he?
Yeah, he was on an old MacBook the last time.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi, like connected to me through Wi-Fi, and it worked perfect for him. You saw the highlights.
Yeah.
You know, he was making great moves with Calvert Chaney in that Bullets game and whatnot. He had a couple big shots with, you know, a couple shots with Tim Legler and everything. So, yeah, it was, and he hit, I think, 2 or 3 threes right at the end of the game with Rod Strickland. But, yeah, no, it's working great for him. And, yeah, Parsec is amazing. Yeah, I did put out that poll for the next NLSC basketball gaming tournament. Obviously, we're in the finals of NBA Live 10, and hopefully me and Cavs 4872 will get a game in soon. But yeah, I wanted to see what people thought. You know, arcade game next. What do you want to choose? You know, what do you want to see or what do you want to participate in? NBA Jam 2010 or On Fire Edition, NBA Street Volume 2, NBA 2K Playgrounds 2, or NBA Ballers. And as I expected, it's been neck and neck between NBA Jam and NBA Street Volume 2. And I'm curious when that poll ends, who comes out on top. But I'm open to doing both games, and I think both games would be incredibly fun.
No, I think we do need to get to both games at some point. And as we've talked about before, March Madness next year, with the you know, when that rolls around, playing a college game would be great.
Yeah, I'm really going to push for NCAA basketball 09. You know, with the classic teams, you've offered to go in and edit the roster and put the real players' names in and whatnot. I think it would be an absolute blast. You know, you can use UNC Jordan and you know, I could use Houston, Drexler, and Olajuwon, and we could have people using Bill Walton or Kareem or Wilt Chamberlain. The Kansas team with Wilt Chamberlain is in the game and all of that stuff. How fun would that be?
That would be an amazing, yeah. Awesome. And the best part about that roster with the PS3 version compared to 360, obviously 360 is also region locked as well, but the best part about the PS3 version with its rosters, and this also goes for Live in 2K as well, is that you can easily just copy them to the USB and upload them. They will work with the emulator, they will work with the consoles. 360 version, you need to rehash the save files. PS3 just works immediately, so I can, if I do edit that file and replace the names, I can just chuck that up in our download section, and people can use that for themselves. They'll use it for the tournament on the emulator, they'll use it on the console, so that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it would just be unbelievable fun, and I also believe that the community would download that roster. I think that would be a great mod release and whatnot, and yeah, I think that gameplay is really fun. You and I connected on that game at one point, and we played a full game, and you were like, hey, this is fun. You know, this was a good time and whatnot. And that just proves that you and I will also have a good connection, and that, you know, you can host too. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
I mean, you could host in the tournament.
That's you know, I probably won't for a PS3 because the emulator doesn't want to work with my PC very well. I've tried March Madness as well.
No, we'll get that fixed.
Yeah, maybe.
That's months away. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I don't understand that disconnect. I don't know why that's not working well for you. But I think Street Volume 2 and NBA Jam would be a really good go-to for the next tournament. Jam has the capability of us doing co-op, though. Like you and me taking on the rest of the NLSC community in a tournament. And we talked about how fun that would be. So I have to decide on, you know, how I want to run that. You know, do I want to try that 4 players connected approach if we choose NBA Jam 2010 or On Fire Edition? Or if I want us to go, you know, single player versus single player. So I got to figure out the way I want to run that.
I think a multiplayer tournament would be awesome because it also there's no tag mode in Jam 2010. So I think it would be a lot more fun to have 2 versus 2 if possible, and if everyone's connections have as good an experience as we did when we tried it out with Q and Omoli a few months back, because that was a blast. And once again, #boss mode.
Yeah, how amazing was that? All 4 of us connected, all different parts of the world, worked perfect for all of us. I thought you and I played incredibly well together. We were talking about it after. I thought we felt like we you know, all of our On Fire Edition sessions paid off when we connected and played against Q and Ermoli. But they played well as well. They were as well. And they were using the Spurs and whatnot. So yeah, no, I have to decide which way I want to go. Ideally, that would be the best way to do it, is 4 players connected.
For sure, and that is something we'll be setting up in the future. Please vote in that poll. Let us know what you'd prefer. But obviously, if it doesn't get the next tournament, we're probably going to be looking at it for a future tournament as well, because the Live 10 tournament, as we said last week, bit of a test run for us, but it's worked so well for the most part that it's clearly viable. People have been having a blast with it, which is the main thing. Is what I think it's been refreshing for people, because we're not the only ones, I think, Derek, that are tired of mechanics in recent games and other issues in recent games, or having to grind in recent games. So to go back and just to play some multiplayer fun and online competitive games in games that didn't really support it back in the day, or in a new way, or people who didn't get to play co-op and competitive games online back then, to be able to bring that functionality back is what's been so great about Parsec. And yeah, people are loving the tournaments. We've had a blast too. So yeah, I'm all for running more tournaments.
I'm excited. I'm excited to see where this takes us and how many games we can get in. And I'll be creating a thread on the NLSC for the NLSC Hall of Fame and whatnot, for people that win those tournaments, and we can show off some highlights in there and whatnot. And I think it would be fun to just get more of the community involved. We already have a lot of the community involved in this, but I'd like to get even more people involved.
No doubt. And speaking of community involvement, Derek, it is time for the NLSC podcast Listener Mailbag.
To the mailman, the prompt phase. What an unbelievable dunk!
So the prompt this week, Derek, was what's a feature from an old game that you'd love to see brought back? Feature, function, mode, etc. I put it out with a short clip of a slow motion dunk from Sean Kemp in Live 96 PC. I love the slow motion dunks in the old games. It's, as I said in the tweet, who would turn it off? What kind of layup-loving basketball gamer would turn off slow motion dunks back in the day? But there's a lot of stuff from old games that we missed that's fallen by the wayside. Sometimes it's difficult to implement it in current games, that it's fallen by the wayside for a reason. But there are ways that we could bring these features back, and we had some great responses. There are definitely some long-time basketball gamers in the community still, like us, and they have great fondness and nostalgia for some of these features, and would love to see them come back.
Yeah, there was one that I didn't see mentioned that you and I talked about on a prior show. The original NBA courtside, those cutscenes on the dunk. When you drive baseline or you go in for a dunk, it goes into the cutscene right underneath the hoop, the close-up. That's something that I thought was really cool when we were playing, and they actually implemented something similar to that, except it was after the dunk was already finished in NBA Live 19. And that actually, you can see that in the top 10 this week that I put out, the Giannis alley-oop, where right after he throws it down, it goes to a cutscene underneath the hoop.
The angle switch, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, the camera switch. So I did want to bring that up. I didn't see it mentioned, but I did think that was a really cool thing that was in the original NBA courtside.
So there was one feature in particular that was very popular when we put out this prompt. Shout out to No Tippin' Pippin at MidwestKing_100 on Twitter. Also mentioned by One Kidney Kenny. Of course, that's Stildo in the forum. And also Knowledge Bone at The Harassment. And might be a couple of others as well. No, there's at least those 3 or 4 there that said it. Signature moves and dunks and layups for classic players. Midwest King says that slow motion from the past was dope. One Kidney Kenny, I love signature moves and miss those the most. Knowledge Bone, signature moves like in the Bulls vs. Blazers, Bulls vs. Lakers, etc. from the Sega and Super Nintendo era. It's the first one that comes to mind. So a lot of people love those signature moves, which were ahead of their time in many respects. And I also think of the go-to moves that were in Live 08-10 as well.
Yeah, I thought I had a feeling that was going to be brought up. It's been brought up before when people have commented about the show. There's still some signature moves in the game, but it just doesn't feel as the same or as organic or as common. You have like Clyde Drexler's signature glide dunk that's still in there. You have some of Jordan's signature dunks and whatnot, but it feels like there's far less signature animations now related to the player that you're using. It feels like that even for the current NBA, there's not as much signatures. Well, that's because a lot of the players too blend in nowadays, right?
Sure.
Like in the NBA today, there's not a lot of, in my opinion, there's not a lot of signature play styles in the NBA now. But or like unique play styles, I should say. Everybody just kind of blends in together. But No, I can agree with that. It brings me back to one of my favorite games ever, NBA Fast Break 98, where the announcer would say, when you executed a signature move, he would say, with a move only he can make. And, it would be a Hakeem Olajuwon shimmy, right? In the post, into a fadeaway, or it would be a Grant Hill dunk, or it would be a David Robinson play, or something like that. And it felt like each team had a couple guys on there that had with a move only he could make. And I do miss that. I believe that we've gone away from that, and that's because the game has gone away from that NBA, trying to replicate that NBA authenticity, and it's moved more into the online scene, and it's moved more into those builds and the money-making modes and whatnot. I definitely feel a lack of authenticity when it comes to the newer games, the newer NBA video games, whether it be NBA Live 19, some of the newer NBA Live games, or the NBA 2K games. So what did you think of when they said that? Did you think of Freestyle Superstars? Because the first thing that I thought of when they brought that up was NBA Fast Break 98, and how much I enjoyed the with a move only he can make stuff.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right in that there are signature animations in the game. There are the signature dunk animations, jump shot animations, etc. So there's a lot of unique animations that are unique to certain players, classic or modern. But it does go beyond that, as you said. And when they said that, I of course thought of those games like Lakers versus Celtics, Bulls versus Blazers, Bulls versus Lakers, etc., that had that signature move that you could trigger in a certain spot on the court. But I also thought of, in that vein, go-to moves, as I said, and that was a big addition in NBA Live 08. You had things like Dwayne Wade with his hop step sideways into the sideways hop step into the jumper. You had Gilbert Arenas had a similar step back move. You had Shaq with his move in the post, followed by that little half hook that he used to do. You had the fadeaways by Dirk and Kobe. You had Steve Nash would be able to do his runner off the wrong leg. All that was very easily done just with the push of the shoot button in the right spot, and sometimes you had to have some other stick movement as well. And it was just very organic. It worked really well. They weren't overpowered, but they were elusive moves just as they were in real life. They were done very well in Live 08. I know that's a game that has a lot of problems, but that is something they did very well. They kind of went away with it in 09 and 10, which was weird because they were on a really good idea there. But that's the kind of moves that I thought of. The specific moves for specific players that you triggered in the right situations and with the right button press and the right spot on the court and everything. So that's what came to mind for me, those signature moves that are just beyond just having the right animation, that they happen in the right context as well.
Right. It feels like almost since they got signature jump shot animations, that and a few signature dunk animations, that they gave up on the rest, right? Like they just made everything else generic. That's kind of how it feels, in my opinion. And it seems often that when you play these new games, just all the players blend in together on the floor, and you don't get the sense that you're using like a superstar or that specific superstar or star, or just player in general. So no, I'm glad they brought that up, because it's something that my brother and I talk about sometimes as well.
I mean, even you look at 2K12 to 2K14, when they brought in NBA's Greatest, they brought back the Legends teams beyond the Michael Jordan, the Jordan Challenge teams, and you were able to do the Dream Shake with Hakeem. And I actually posted a clip from 2K14, what was then 2K14 Next Gen. The Dream Shake with Hakeem was just very satisfying to do. But we've even gone away from that. I mean, it was still, as recently as that, we still had some of those moves where you could do that really good-looking Dream Shake in the post. But I've tried to do that in 2K21 and 2K22, and you just can't do it.
Right, with all of this mocap and people being able to be in studio and whatnot, and for them to capture all of this and for them to be able to implement it with today's technology and whatnot, I'm surprised there isn't more signature moves and go-to moves and whatnot. And just with, where we are with technology in general, it's surprising, and with space as well and capacity, like we do with the newer consoles and whatnot in PCs. It's surprising to me that they don't implement more signatures for not only the classic teams and all-time teams, but for the current players and whatnot. But yeah, I'll always go back to NBA Fast Break 98, because it was groundbreaking to me, that the announcer would call out that it was a move only that player could make, and then the animation just played out so well and everything. It's like, I feel like I'm really using Grant Hill. I feel like I'm really using Hakeem Olajuwon.
etc. So that's my first real experience with like go-to signature play styles that I can point to from the past.
And it's definitely something we'd love to see return moving forward, because as you said, it seems viable, because you actually have more and more players coming into the studio and doing mocap, and you're even getting some legends in there. I know Kareem did some mocap, and it was for the story over the years, but I believe he's also done his Skyhook as well, because that's in there for the 2K22. They added a new Kareem Skyhook, so it's something they can do. I mean, he doesn't have to do a lot of running, so even the older players can do that, obviously, if they're willing to suit up. And speaking of bringing back those classic features for classic teams, at the Dom45 on Twitter, shout out to you, says classic filters from 2K12, NBA's greatest, which we mentioned a moment ago. Absolutely. Imagine being able to pick those filters or have them appear automatically on those teams, or at least choose to use them automatically, or choose to use a retro filter. This is something a lot of games have done as an option over the years. On Fire Edition has some retro filters, or was it Jam 2010? One of the two of them, maybe both of them, has that option to have that an old 8-bit or 16-bit filter that you can put on. Having the black and white and that grainy footage, even if it doesn't have all of the audio effects that they did for NBA's greatest, because I did hear that they kind of fluked some of those effects. But even if you've just got that visual filter to do, which people do with Sweet Effects and things like that, changing the look of the game, if they had that filter by default as an option, I'd love to see that come back as an optional feature for use for any team that you use.
Yeah, there's no reason why we can't have that now. Let's be honest. We were doing that back in 2K12, and let's go back even further. NBA Jam for Xbox.
I was going to say,
remember?
Jam 2004, yeah.
NBA Jam 2004 had filters. You would play, one of the classic challenges and whatnot in NBA Jam 2004, which I thought was a great game. I really enjoyed that game. Played all the way through it. You would get the black and white screen and the different filters for the different eras. Yeah, there's no reason for that. I mean, if you can do what they did with NBA Live 16 and Live 18, Live 19, and have like finals atmosphere or playoffs atmosphere and then regular atmosphere, and you can change that on the fly and have it change when you go into the game, there's no reason why you can't have like a filter for graphics, right? So I think that it would add to the immersion, absolutely, to using classic teams. Obviously, you'll want to edit those classic teams quite a bit before you put them on the floor, or else they won't play anything like their real life self. But I think it would, add to the control aspect and the customization aspect for the end user, and it would make it even more fun to put those teams on the floor.
I'm still surprised that isn't an idea that 2K has borrowed from Live, because obviously they've taken some good ideas, and people say that, Live was never good, it never had good ideas. Wrong on both counts. But one idea that they haven't taken is that ability to change atmosphere settings, regular season, finals, playoffs, etc. I would have thought that's something they would have borrowed, and that is the kind of detail that you usually expect of 2K.
By the way, how great has that been on the NBA Live 10 tournament?
Oh, it's made it. That atmosphere,
having the playoffs atmosphere. They have the playoff symbol logos and cutouts and all of that stuff during our games and everything, and it just looks awesome. While we're playing, it's like, hey, we're really playing in the NBA playoffs. And even though we're only playing exhibition, it's like we're playing in the playoffs and whatnot. So, yeah, it is surprising that hasn't been borrowed. That's probably on the table for them. I'm going to guess they'll implement that in the future. But it is a really nice touch from EA Sports.
I will say that I prefer that setting in Live 10 as opposed to 14 through 19. Because in 14 through 19, if you pick playoffs atmosphere and you have East versus West, it will always default to NBA Finals. Whereas with Live 10, with the tournament, we've had mixtures. We haven't had East and West brackets. So we've been able to have East and West teams go up in earlier rounds and still have just regular playoffs presentation. Whereas in 14 to 19, you can only do, if you have playoffs, it has to be conference finals or NBA Finals. It's kind of limited in that respect, which is a bit disappointing in 14 to 19.
Yeah, I just don't understand why they can't stick with a formula that works. Like, why even change that?
Why not expand the options to say, okay, you have a playoffs team, you have playoffs presentation just with whatever, or you can choose Eastern Conference Finals, or first round, or second round, or NBA Finals, as the case may be.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with NBA 2K. They'll probably borrow that in the future and put their own little spin on it and whatnot. But like I said, if they can do that, there's no reason why we can't have graphics filters. Like I said, we've had graphics filters. We had graphics filters in games in the early 2000s.
where it's 2021. So.
It's technically possible, yeah. It's absolutely something that they could be doing. We'd love to see them do it, but it is interesting the ideas that make it into some games, not others, and certainly when games are made by the same publisher, the same developer. And to that point, KidCash202 at KidCash202 on Twitter. Shout out to you as always. The College Hoops 2K series allowed users to select arenas before the tip-off. I'm not sure why this feature never made it to the NBA 2K series. That's interesting as well, because that was an NBA Live as well, that you could pick a different arena to not all live games, but I think the 7th generation and PC ports, not necessarily, well, the 6th generation rather, PS2, Xbox, and PC versions of Live at the time. You could pick a different arena to either of the teams that were playing. So you'd pick your home and away team, and then you would just pick an arena. You could pick arena if you wished, separate to that. And you could do that in the 2K series as well. I do remember that from College Hoops, having played that earlier this year for my retrospectives. And why that's not been in 2K. That's interesting. And that's a feature that, it's a very niche feature that not everyone would use, because usually you probably would just want to play with the whatever home arena is for the selected home team. But there are times when that might be fun to do. And it's a very small feature, but one that can be very fun, or have some uses. And yeah, interesting that it never made it to 2K, NBA 2K, but it was in the College Hoop series.
Yeah, you can do that in MLB The Show 2020. 2020 and 2021, I believe, too, is as well, where you can do that in exhibition, or you can do it in your franchise, where before you go into a game, you can just select any field that you want to play on. You know what I mean? Any stadium. So, no, I think that's a great point. I think that also brings, with that functionality in the game, it brings the possibility of more modding to the forefront. If you were allowed to create arenas, like I had talked about before, if you were allowed to create stadiums in, outside of my NBA, I mean, how cool would that be? For you to be able to create just a bunch of stadiums and whatnot, and then be able to connect with people and select a stadium for them to play in, right? Like a custom stadium that you made. And I know that we've had that, like you talked about in past games, but I'm thinking of the future. That could be a really fun part of the future. It would also be great for custom rosters as well, if people were able to, mod outside of my NBA, create those team-specific stadiums, and then they can be selected before you go into a game. So, no, I think that's a really good point.
And I wrote an article earlier this year about the joys of exhibition mode. And as much as I love deep modes and being able to get engaged in a long campaign mode or franchise mode or career mode or whatever, just setting up some fun scenarios in exhibition mode can be a lot of fun. And you and I can attest to that from our Parsec sessions. An option like this facilitates wacky situations. Like you can pick this team and that team, and then have them play on another team's court if you like that. Now, people might say, you can do that in my team if you get all the parts together. But it's not the same. You have to collect those parts. You have to collect those cards. And, of course, all the recurrent revenue mechanics that are connected to that. So being able to set up these scenarios in exhibition play and play in our mode and just go crazy with it and have some fun on the virtual hardwood is something that we've kind of lost. And features like this, smaller and niche as they may be, they're helpful with that.
Yeah, that NBA Live 10 fantasy teams. Function.
Yeah, we need to bring that back. But again, people will say, "Oh,
how much fun did we have this year with that?"
Amazing.
We had a lot of
fun
this year.
Yeah. And it's crazy. It's so crazy that we have, because obviously we have actual retro teams in newer 2K games, and of course we have in 2K17 we've got your Ultimate Classic Teams roster. So we have the means of having a more detailed experiences with putting together retro teams or playing with the existing ones. However, there's just something special about putting together that scenario, building something with the assets we have, that it's kind of a challenge, is it not, to find the teams that we can make and put it together and have them look authentic. Like when we brought back the Sonics, yes, the logos are wrong, but we're using them away so they've got the right jerseys for the time and everything. So it was just satisfying to create something new, and there was fun in putting that together.
Oh, 100%. And part of the enjoyment is using your imagination, right? That's how we grew up. Like I talked about.
Yes, that's throwback to that. Yeah.
Basketball. Yeah. Going up on my typewriter upstairs and, creating fake articles
and cutting out Isaiah Thomas's picture out of a magazine that I had around the house and, gluing it to the article and using my imagination that way and, putting dialogue in there about the game and the season and all of that stuff and the performances. It kind of goes back to that. It kind of goes back to using the in-game assets and using your imagination and letting it run wild. And I do miss that aspect of video games.
In a similar vein, Mugen Asakura, I do apologize if I have mispronounced that, at Lo-Fi Samurai 11, or Lo-Fi Samurai 11 on Twitter. Shout out to you. Situation mode from 2K10 and 2K11, Big Moments mode from Live 15, Legends mode like MJ's in 2K11, Create a Legend mode, which was the spin-off of the career mode, etc. The scenario modes in games, which we lost over the years, setting up situations. I found that 1998, or it wasn't a 98 roster, it was a classic teams roster that I'd somehow downloaded off the EA locker for Live 08 back in the day. I just found it there on my Xbox 360 hard drive, and I set up the final seconds of the Game 6 of the 98 finals, because the Bulls and Jazz teams are in that game that someone's created. Again, I don't know where that came from, but it's there in my collection. I might have to upload that to the download section, actually. But again, being able to put that together in scenario mode, and 2K's had some great scenario modes as well. That's something else that we've missed.
We talked about this. What a wasted opportunity by NBA 2K and EA Sports for not coming back, by the way. But what a wasted opportunity for NBA 2K, the release after Kobe's passing, to not put a scenario mode tied to Kobe. Right? We talked about this. What a wasted opportunity. Give people the 81, a challenge mode with Kobe's 81-point challenge. Give a mode related to Kobe's, playoff and regular season exploits, and have people try to play in those scenarios and put them in different parts of those games and whatnot. I think it was a monumental wasted opportunity by NBA 2K. They could have showed how creative they could be. And I think that everybody on YouTube, not everybody, but a lot of people on YouTube would have been showing off that mode.
Oh, no doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
It. People on social media would have been going crazy about that mode and showing it off, and it would have been great promotion for 2K. So, no, I definitely agree with you. NBA 2K12's, greatest mode, the other, NBA Live 15 big moments, all of that stuff. Yeah, the scenarios, people love those. I'm not a huge fan of them myself, but I see the draw and I see why they're really cool.
Exactly, and the ability to create your own scenarios with the situation mode, etc. in 2K10, 2K11, just fallen by the wayside. And again, they don't make money, and that is the problem. If they don't make money, they don't get prioritized. Create a legend where you could take an existing NBA player and play a career mode with them. Again, it doesn't. Well, that might generate revenue. They could probably find a way to put VC into that, as they do with everything, or even just take your player into that if you want to have a bare bones, straightforward My Career mode, like an alternative, much as they had My League and My GM for a while there, and still do, of course, current gen. It's just one of those things that's fallen by the way, so I'd love to see it come back. Big Moments, I thought, was a great concept in Live 14, 15, and 16. The scenarios that came up with. Played a lot of it in 14, mostly because I could really only play 14 in spurts, so it was more fun to just play a 10-second scenario than a 48-minute game. But even in 15, which I enjoyed a lot more, it was definitely fun to play that. And it's creative, and that's the other thing that I really appreciate. And it harkens back to the old days of great creativity in the games.
You know what I would love to see that I think people would really enjoy as far as like a challenge and something different? A do what I did mode in the newer games, as in Andrew takes in, and they could limit it too. They could just say, you can only use the default teams. So the default classic teams, all-time teams, regular teams, and you can't change any of the sliders. So it could just be like pro, Hall of Fame, blah, blah, blah. But you jump into that mode and say Andrew scores 80 points with Rudy Gay. That's something he could upload and say, you have to score 80 points with Rudy Gay. I got, 10 dunks, and Andrew Begley got 10 dunks in one game with Zach LaVine. Can you do this? And it's something that you uploaded. And then that person has to, has the ability to go in there. And if he gets 10 dunks in one game with Zach LaVine, he passes that challenge, and maybe he gets virtual currency, right? Maybe he gets a reward. Maybe he unlocks something. from completing your challenge. So I think that that's something that could be part of the future of gaming as well, like a do what I did and let me upload that scenario.
Oh, for sure. And there is something like that in my team with the PS5 activities, PlayStation activities challenges in my team, where you can best other people's scores and there is a scoreboard. So it's in place. Like, the infrastructure and the concepts are in place. I like your idea a lot better because it's also not tied to my team necessarily. But yeah, you have to do it. You can't just specify a challenge like score 100 points in 5 minutes with somebody. You have to do it as well. And with those settings. So you could have the different. You could have pro settings. You could have pro challenges and rookie challenges all the way up to All-Star and Hall of Fame. So you could have a lot of fun with that. And this is something we've said before, is that you can take these old ideas and bring them back, but also update them for modern games and expand upon them with the new tech and connectivity that's available to everybody. So I'd love to see more out-of-the-box ideas, and it is hard to really push for those niche ideas. We always will, but we have to realize that they're less likely, especially if they will not make money or may even cost recurrent revenue. But still, mention them.
Think about what do what I did mode would do. That would be endless content. Think about that. Think about all the people around the world that would be uploading their exploits in that. So that would be like you could just go in there and you'd have like hundreds of challenges that you could complete. You could jump on the game and say, oh, this person scored 60 points with Jokic, had a 60-point triple-double with Nikola Jokic. Let me try to do that. And they could do that challenge over and over and over again until they complete it. It would be like endless playability, right?
It'd be like a sandbox mode, yeah.
Right. It would be so fun. And by the way, I would do it. If they had a mode like that I could just jump into, and it says, and they're challenging me and they're saying, hey, because we play on Hall of Fame. So if somebody says on Hall of Fame, beat the Grizzlies by 50, right? Or something like that, or beat the Grizzlies by 30 in order to beat this challenge, I would take that challenge and I would say, you know what? I want to prove to you that I can do this too, right? So I just think, the more I think about this, I was just thinking about that kind of on the fly. I'd absolutely die to have a mode like that, and I think that a lot of gamers would love it.
It would be a hot new mode, and again, you've got that connectivity, so it's not just, you against a CPU or whatever. To be able to share that and create that content for each other and challenge each other. Yeah, so much could come of that. And any kind of scenario mode I would welcome bringing back, as well as something like Big Moments. And again, a challenge mode using those retro teams, although, of course, as we've said, polishing up the ratings and whatnot, and not having Nick Van Exel have LeBron's dunk package or whatever, as sometimes happens. Also,
it was Vince.
Yeah.
Okay. Vince Carter.
So we need to clean that up ideally, and of course, once again, shout out to MJ Wizards and check out his roster on NBA 2K22 PS5. But you would need to fix it up for maximum quality for that. Nate Stasho at Nate Stasho on Twitter. Shout out to you. That is the NBA Live 2001 highlights. Of course, they've sent some great highlights for the top 10 over the past 30 weeks of doing the top 10 as you've been doing. Mentions the handshake button in Live 2001, which was a staple in Live from 95 through to 2002. Says it's the best defensive weapon I've ever seen in a basketball game. And back in the day, it certainly was. Of course, bringing that back is probably not going to happen because we don't allow handshaking anymore. But it was, and we were talking about it before we started recording, Derek. I always thought of it as almost an intentional foul button to push. But if you do use it in a smart way, you can create that separation and knock back a player in the post and whatnot without getting the foul call, at least if the sliders aren't all the way up. The foul frequency sliders and options in the old games, of course. It could be used as quite an effective defensive weapon, but I always thought of it as a knock people down and get away with a foul or intentional foul button back in the day. But no, it is used much as handshaking was in the real NBA at the time.
And you know that Nate Stasho and Roger Ward, the two NBA Live 2001 guys, they've mastered it.
Oh, yeah.
They've use of it. I mean, the amount they play that game and whatnot, and, they have been contributors to the top 10 in the past. By the way, I want to say something really quick about the top 10. What's crazy about 30 weeks of every week putting out a top 10, do you realize that means over 300 highlights?
Exactly.
Have been posted.
Yeah.
That's just
mind-blowing. Yeah.
To me. Yeah. Just a lot of great highlights, and I appreciate all the submissions and whatnot. But no, if anybody's mastered that, it's Roger Ward and Nate Stasho. And just a reminder to you guys, I haven't seen a highlight from you in a couple of weeks, so I'm expecting one.
And finally, we have Marvelson36 at MarvelBlack47 on Twitter. Shout out to you. T-bar free throws, also known as the T-meter, of course, and rapidly pressing buttons during another player's free throws to mess with them, which there is still a distract mechanic in 2K where you hit the triggers and it will shake the screen. But yes, that was a big staple back in the day as well, and I'm still a fan of the T-meter, Derek. I know it's outdated. I know there's other ways of shooting free throws that are arguably superior, certainly just as good and perhaps more modern and more modern feeling, but I do love the T-meter, or the T-bar. It's been both, or the cross, or the T-meter. It's classic. I love it. If they brought it back, I wouldn't be heartbroken. I don't think it will, but I wouldn't be heartbroken.
Yeah, it'd be cool if we had an option to bring it back. You know what I mean?
True.
Like, have separate mechanics. We've had that in the past where they were like, oh, well, you can use the joystick for, you actually can still do that now. You can either use the joystick for your free throws or you can use the button, etc. But, it would be cool if there was a setting that said, hey, you can turn this into the T-bar free throw and use that mechanic throughout this game. I wouldn't mind having that as an option. I'd still probably use it the way it is currently in it right now in NBA 2K. And my brothers and I actually like the way it works, and it adds to the realism. But no, I never hated the T-bar free throws. It's certainly a lot better than those NBA 2K bumper free throws that were part of the early series, which drove you nuts. You're probably still having nightmares about that. You know what I think it would be really cool is if you could initiate the crowd reacting during a free throw, like make the crowd louder. You know what I mean? Like if you're at home court and somebody else is at the line, like you push a button and maybe you push excessively, and the more you push it, the louder the crowd gets.
Yeah.
Or maybe they yell out something, or maybe they hold up something. Or something like that, something silly like that, like they used to do with Larry Bird to try to distract him from his free throws. There's some pictures out there of like the crowd holding up like a poster of a woman or something like that in order to distract Larry Bird from the line, etc. Stuff like that would be really cool, I think, in order to add to the immersion and make the opponent more a part of the free throw aspect.
I see a lot of fans along the baseline holding up like a plush brick, big kind of fake brick or something like that, and waving that around. I can't remember which college it was, but there was a college that figured out all the fans along the baseline, as the free throw shooter was going up, and you may know this story, but as they were about to shoot, everyone would just immediately just lean left, which would draw the player's eye away at the last second, and miss because they were distracted not by the constant movement, which you kind of tune out, but that last minute veer to the left. And that was pretty clever on the crowd's part. So it shows the impact of the crowd in the college game.
Right, and if you've ever played basketball before, whether it be in a rec league or in high school or in any competitive setting or anything like that, the littlest thing can throw you off.
Definitely,
it's true. So you would know that if you played, like you did and I did and whatnot. So no, I think that there's definitely more they could do with that. I was never a big fan of the screen shaking thing because it never felt authentic. You know what I mean? I think that there's different authentic approaches that they could take to it.
So those are some great suggestions, and thank you once again for responding to our prompt. I would definitely agree that signature moves coming back. I would love to see scenario mode, big moments. As you said, if they could bring back the T-bar, the T-meter as an alternative shooting form as they have, and little things like being able to switch the venue before. Love all those ideas. Handshake button would be awesome for retro rosters. Probably not going to come back, unfortunately, because of the way the NBA handles things. I'd also mention fantasy teams as well as a mode I'd love to come back. And even the example that I posted, the slow motion dunks, wouldn't work in an online setting, and even in co-op it might, competitive play, online head-to-head and whatnot, and play now online, probably not going to be there. But it's just as a retro option, kind of like your classic camera angle, that isometric angle for that was in live at the time. Bringing that back and bringing back like a slow-mo dunks that you could turn on and just play against the CPU. I'd love to have some retro options like that. And of course filters as well. So I'm all for bringing back some old stuff like that and finding a way to make it work in the modern games.
Bring back stat overlays at the foul line.
Yes.
Like realistic presentation stat overlays at the foul line. Bring us back to the days of more stat overlays. Give us more stats, on the screen. It adds to the immersion. It adds to the presentation. Something like that I definitely miss. One thing that's great about MLB The Show 2020 is when they have like the MLB Network presentation that you can select. And when the batter goes up, it shows their batting stats every time they go up, their home runs, their RBIs, their batting percentage and whatnot. And it's a really cool graphic. And, you're getting graphics all the time about your pitcher's performance and whatnot. And I think that that's sorely missing in the newer games. And we used to have a lot more stat pop-ups in the older games. So bring those back.
Completely agree. And thank you once again to all the suggestions. Please keep the conversation going in our forum, on social media. And of course, any other topic suggestions, questions you have for the mailbag, podcast at nba-live.com, or hit us up in the forum or our social media channels, which we will be promoting shortly. But that has brought us to the end of episode number 405 of the NLSC podcast. We thank you for tuning in. The show comes out every Sunday on the NLSC, which is nba-live.com. You can also find us on all the streaming apps, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, just to name a few. On those platforms, search for NLSC Podcast, look for our logo, and that will be us. Or indeed, tune in on our YouTube channel. As long as you're tuning in and enjoying the show each and every week, that is the main thing. And we said we'd promote our socials, Derek, so what are yours? And do you have any other final words for our listeners this week?
No, thanks again for listening to the NLSC podcast. We appreciate all the comments on the show recently and whatnot. And also thank you for all the submissions for the NLSC top 10 plays of the week, because I think the top 10s have been absolutely awesome and I enjoy putting them together every single week. You can find me on Twitter at D4384 or at D43G. I am also on the NLSC as a team member over there, D for Free, and I am on YouTube, D for Free, where you can find a whole bunch of basketball video game gameplay videos.
Don't forget to check out our other content throughout the week, as well as all the File Editions posts, where we recap recent uploads to the downloads section. And if you are a modder, please feel free to make use of our facilities. We want to preserve those files for future generations, for years to come. It always sucks when we see a poster in the forum asking for a mod that has gone missing over the years that we could have preserved. So please make use of our facilities, and thank you to everybody who does. And again, thank you to everybody who listens to the podcast, and of course, interacts with our content throughout the week. I am Andrew in the forum, and Andrew NLSC on Twitter. The NLSC is on Twitter and Facebook at the NLSC. We're on Instagram, NLSC Basketball. Our YouTube is NBA Live Series Center. And of course, give it locked to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. But yes, that's all for this week, so thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.